In an effort to bolster the Ukrainian army, the U.S. is sending some of the Soviet-made air defense equipment it secretly acquired decades ago. The Wall Street Journal is reporting the weapons are familiar to the Ukrainian military, which inherited this type of equipment after the breakup of the USSR. The systems the U.S. plans to send include decades-old short-range and long-range missile systems intended to protect large areas. Do we have John Kirby? Let's bring in John Kirby now. Admiral, thank you so much for being with us. Let's talk about this weapon transfer. It seems to me we have a lot of this going on. Some old Warsaw Pact countries transferring weapons into Ukraine, and in exchange, the United States backfills them with some more modern weapons.
We're having lots of discussions with allies and partners, Joe, about getting into Ukraine the kinds of long-range air defense systems that they're trained on, that they know how to use, and that they've been using for quite some time, and actually very effectively in the last month or so. So we're working with allies and partners. We were just over in NATO. The Secretary met with counterparts in Slovakia and Bulgaria, certainly at Brussels with other NATO allies, to see what can be done across the alliance to provide these kinds of systems. And obviously, we're talking to them about options for offsets. For instance, if they do that, would they need some backfill capabilities, and what would that look like? How could the United States help? So we're exploring those options actively with them.
Admiral, good morning. We heard from a NATO official yesterday to NBC News saying that the war right now in Ukraine looks like a stalemate. It doesn't feel that way to the civilians on the ground who are being attacked, to the 2 million Ukrainians who fled across the border. What is the Pentagon's assessment of the military state of affairs right now?
Yeah, we would agree with you that calling it a stalemate doesn't seem exactly the best assessment here. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of fighting going on. It's not a static conflict. The Ukrainians are fighting back bravely and valiantly, but here's the thing. They're fighting back in the places and at the times and with the capabilities that are serving their needs best. They're not trying to defend everywhere. They're trying to defend where they know the Russians are trying to take. And so here we are, day 27, Willie, and the Russians really have only taken 2 city centers in Ukraine, and both of them are in the south. They have not been able to take Kyiv or Kharkiv or Chernihiv. Certainly, Mariupol is very much an active fight right now. The Ukrainians are defending that city as well. So they have been frustrated in achieving any of these objectives, and that's because the Ukrainians are fighting back so hard.
President Biden, as you know, warned yesterday about the distinct possibility, the likelihood, in fact, of a cyber attack coming from Russia in Ukraine, in Europe, perhaps into the United States. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, we're calling Russia out for what we're seeing them do. We want to make sure that we're being as open and transparent before they get a chance to act. This is a piece of the president's strategy in that regard. So we were very honest with business leaders yesterday about the kinds of things we're seeing. Here's the Defense Department. We haven't suffered any attacks. Our networks get probed every single day, but we haven't seen anything affect our infrastructure or critical U.S. government infrastructure. Again, I can't speak to what's going on out there in the corporate world, but we wanted to make sure that leaders knew and were aware that the Russians would probably try this kind of tactic going forward.
Admiral Kirby, President Zelensky says they are on the brink of survival. He's not mincing words about how bad the situation is for the people of Ukraine, many of them trying to defend the country. You have said there are discussions happening, working with allies and partners. There's a lot of talking. I know there are certain things you probably can't share, but is there any action happening with getting actual supplies, weaponry, whatever it is the Ukrainians need, into the hands of Ukrainians at this moment?
Yes, ma'am. Every single day. Every single day, we're helping coordinate shipments not only of our gear and equipment, but of other allies and partners, and getting them into the hands of the Ukrainians. And this stuff is not sitting on a shelf somewhere. When the Ukrainians get it, they're out there using it every single day. Well, for instance, the $350 million that the president signed out a few weeks ago, we're going to complete the rest of that this week. And the $800 million that he just announced a few days ago, we're already in pen to paper right now and working quickly as we know. It's not on the side of the Ukrainians, and so we're going to work as fast as we can to get them these materials.
Helene Cooper.
Hey, Kirby, you owe me a phone call, first of all. You said earlier that you talked about how the Russian forces are stalled. Why is this? Why do you not call this, at this point, a war of attrition? Why is it that the Russian forces are stalled?
Look, I think, first of all, we're going to sort of shy away of putting labels on this and bumper stickers on it. I mean, clearly, this is an active, dynamic, bloody fight. And as President Zelensky put it, it's a fight for their survival, and we understand that and we respect that. I would say a couple of reasons, Helene. One, the Russians have suffered missteps of their own. They did not plan properly for logistics and sustainment. They're running out of food. They're running out of fuel. They're having trouble making any progress on the ground. Number two, they're not integrating their forces the way you would think a modern military would. Their air-to-ground operations are not fully coordinated. Same thing goes with their maritime operations, with everything else going on. You're not seeing that level of what we would call jointness here at the Pentagon out of the Russian military. And then number three, and this is obviously the most important factor, is the Ukrainian resistance, which we are actively helping. One reason why that they are being so effective in the field is because of the kinds of material that the United States and so many other nations are giving them in the fight. But we also have been training them, Helene, as you know, over the last 8 years. So it's not just about the stuff, it's about their ability to use that stuff in the field effectively. And that really was a result, again, of the United States, Canada, UK, other allies, who over the last 8 years have put trainers on the ground to help build their competence in the field.
Hey, Admiral, good morning. Jonathan Lemire. Why don't you explore a little further on that point? Was this Russian overconfidence for their poor strategy here? But more than that, there's another key piece here is that the heavy losses that they're taking. And I know it's hard to verify exactly, but what is the Pentagon's latest sense in terms of the equipment they've lost, but also the manpower?
A couple of things there. One, we do think that the Russians underestimated the strength that the Ukrainians would be able to put in the field, their ability to fight back, the capabilities that they had. We think there was sort of an intelligence failure on their part in terms of how they got ready for this. I think we think they were overconfident in how fast they were going to be able to move, and that has clearly frustrated them. Again, 27 days in, they haven't really accomplished a whole lot other than the death and destruction of so many cities and putting people, fleeing them into refugee status. And I think that writ large, I mean, this is a war that has not gone their way.
So, Admiral, we've been asking a question that obviously a lot of military planners are concerned about. I'm sure people inside the Pentagon have talked about it. We're concerned. America's concerned. The world's concerned. What happens if Vladimir Putin gets so frustrated he decides to use tactical nuclear weapons? What happens if he starts using chemical weapons on Ukrainians? Is that a red line that is crossed? Is that the time that NATO has to come in and protect the Ukrainian people from just these mass atrocities that are being visited upon them by Vladimir Putin?
I think we need to be really careful, Joe, when we start talking about red lines and hypotheticals here. The president was very clear that the international community would react strongly should Mr. Putin decide to use weapons of mass destruction, whether that's chem, bio, nuclear. We haven't seen any indication today, Joe, that that's in the offing or that that's sort of imminent at all, and that includes the nuclear stuff. And what I would tell you is that we're very confident, very comfortable in the strategic deterrent posture that we have, not only for our homeland, but for our allies and partners. We're looking at this every day. We're monitoring it. We're watching what he's doing. We haven't seen an indication of the use of WMD right now.
Well, the West has underestimated this guy since 2007, 2008. He keeps talking about nuclear weapons. He keeps talking about World War III, state TV. People keep talking about World War III and nuclear weapons. Diplomats, even before the war, were talking about the use of nuclear weapons. This would be the alarms are all going off. They're talking about the use of nuclear weapons in a way no leader has for the past 30, 40 years. This isn't really a hypothetical question, is it?
No doubt, Joe, that the rhetoric that we're hearing coming out of the Kremlin is concerning. No doubt about that. And it's not helpful to international security to have him even talk about this or broach this. For instance, accusing the Ukrainians of conducting a biological chemical attack. It's the Russian playbook to blame others for that which you're preparing to do yourself. Obviously, this is of concern to us. And that is why, Joe, quite frankly, that we are working hard to make sure we get into the Ukrainian hands the kinds of tools that they need to defend themselves without further escalating this conflict. I think we can all agree that a broadening war here and an escalated conflict between two nuclear powers is not only not good for our security or Europe's security, but it's not good for Ukraine.
So, Admiral, the question that President Biden will have to answer at NATO and has been asked by President Zelensky over and over again is what more can the United States be doing? What more can the West do? Obviously, crippling economic sanctions. Russia's economy is collapsing from the inside. It's imploding. Those missiles have been going in, the Javelin missiles, American-made, that you've been talking about, that have made a difference on the ground. What is left in the American, from your point of view, the military toolbox? What more can the United States do to help Ukraine?
Well, the first thing we're going to do, Willie, is get that $800 million security package filled out, get the list filled out, the inventory, and get it into Ukraine as quickly as possible. And certainly the president would not rule out additional security assistance packages as we go forward. So it's one, making sure Ukraine can continue to defend itself with the kinds of systems and tools that they know how to do it. Number two, obviously, you've talked about the sanctions, and the president is continuing to look at options with respect to economic consequences on Russia. And then number three, and this is really important, this is one of the reasons the president is going to Brussels and to Europe this week, is to make sure that we make it clear to our allies in NATO that our commitment to Article 5 is ironclad, that we're going to defend every inch of NATO territory, that the United States is willing to put skin in the game in terms of making sure we shore up the eastern flank of NATO. About a month or so ago, Willie, we had about 80,000 U.S. troops in Europe, either on rotational or permanent deployments, and now we have 100,000. And we're constantly looking at that footprint and that posture to make sure it's right.
Hey, thanks so much for watching our YouTube channel. You can follow up on today's top stories and breaking news, or catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.